All right, everybody, welcome back. We are in sales training module number 3. Today we're talking about mirroring and matching, the art and science of subconscious influence. Josh, what does that even mean?
I gotta tell you, it's about how to speak to people without actually opening your mouth. So that's the exciting part. Or when you do, it's so purposeful that it creates an emotional reaction, a visceral reaction in their life, or they just make decisions based on things that you want them to do. It's kind of like these are not the droids you're looking for.
That's exactly, we're getting into Jedi level here.
This is serious stuff.
I love it. So as always, start out with a quote: treat people the way you want to be treated, talk to people the way you want to be talked to. Respect is earned, not given. And so some of the things, the tips and tricks and hacks that we're going to give you in communication are going to help you to earn respect faster. And so that's one of the tools we want you to have. So today we're talking about communication. More is communicated non-verbally than verbally, and we're going to dive into some statistics in a second here. But we're talking about language and vocal patterns, gestures, facial expressions, and as a bonus, what not to do. So let's dive right in. Josh, go over this with us, because this should, as is depicted on the screen, should blow your mind.
It blows my mind, and usually what I like to do is kind of set it up for a group or an audience and say, how much do you think of communication and what type of your communication or percentage is verbal or your body language or your tonality? And most people would never guess this. A lot of people, when you say verbal is the actual words that come out of your mouth, right? So if I just transcribe something and put it on paper, that would be the verbal, right? And that would be the words, and that's it. 55% is the body language. So as you watch somebody move, as you see me on my screen, whether I'm sitting like this or whether I have big motions or whatever else, that's your body language, and that's what you convey. And the last part, 38%, is your tonality, your rate of speech. So you'll have a different view of who I am and how I speak if I speak like this, like Eeyore, or if I'm this huge personality and I just want to create a lot of energy and momentum and the rest of that. You'll automatically judge and determine what your view is of somebody based on all of this stuff together. But the most incredible part is we don't pay attention as a society, as a group, to body language as much as we do the words. Like we're trying to write every perfect word in an article or on a script or whatever else. But really, it's meaningless. It's in comparison to everything else. If you had a great tonality, rate of speech, incredible body language that was very welcoming, energetic, enthusiasm, the rest of that's the majority of your communication anyway. So I could be like, blah, 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 blah. And, based on this, obviously I'm exaggerating a bit, but based on this, you're not going to remember the experience of exactly, or sorry, you're not going to remember exactly what I said. You're going to remember the experience that you had with me or that you had in interacting with me.
Well, and I think this is really important. We live in a day and an age where video communication, for example, pulls very, very well on all social media platforms, almost always outperforms any written variant of the same communication. And so if you send an email, guess what? Your email has a maximum of 7% efficacy rate, right? That's the most you're able to communicate if you're looking at 0 to 100%. Now, if you write emails in a certain way, and emails can have either slow pace or a fast pace. There's actually an entire segment that we could teach on how to write emails with fast pace that read quickly. So you might be able to get some rate in there, keeping people, moving through it. But if you use video, both in your meetings or calls or whatever it might be, you can increase the efficacy of your communication just by introducing those things and being intentional about it. Start off, let's dive right into language and vocal patterns. Josh, take it away from tone and inflection. Well, we'll both just jump in the whole time.
Yeah, just jump in wherever you want to. So we call it the uptick or upswing. There are ways that people speak, and you've probably heard of this. I don't want to judge an entire culture or group, but Canadians usually have a little bit of an upswing at the end of their sentence, generally speaking, or at least that's a perception of the people in the U.S. But there's an uptick or upswing at the end of their sentence, so it sounds more like a question. So when we go through this, I want you to think about not only how to pay attention to these things, and when other people, you're listening for other people's volume and emphasis and the rest of that, which we'll get to, but also how you could interact with that is really what this is all about. So the whole training is about mirroring and matching, and that's what we're going through. So you want to first take inventory, if you will, of what it means, and second, take a look at how you would interact with that, or how you could, ebb and flow with that type of person, right? So the uptick is that swing up. The volume is a very big thing. I would tell you, if you have kids, you understand this, because kids don't necessarily have that same volume control, especially when they're a little bit younger, and they seem to be screaming at all times when really they're just talking normally. But if you think about it, when we go through this, if my kids were really, really loud and they're really energetic, and I always spoke to them like this, there would not be alignment in how we interacted together.
Right. And I think both of those things are really exemplified. One of the things that Josh and I want to convey to you is not that you're going to identically match and mirror everything that somebody does, but there's a merging. It's like traffic on a freeway, right? We have on ramps because you're moving from one rate of speed to another rate of speed. And so that's part of this, is like kind of matching into, like on an on ramp, matching what they are doing and saying and how they're doing it, and then getting up to speed with them. And this is kind of the secret behind it, or the hack behind it, you can actually begin to lead them in all of these things. So, emphasis on specific words, aligning tonality. You've all experienced this, where just right away two people have a very similar style that might be, it just happens naturally. Josh and I are very similar in so many ways. We say that we share 50% of the brain. We speak and act very similarly. The moment we met each other, it was like, oh, this is a brother. Like, this is somebody who I'm going to be friends with for life. We didn't know we were going to be business partners down the road, but it was like there was a kinship that was there immediately. And so you feel that with some people. Other people, you talk to them and you're like, they're in like a different planet. They like to talk real slow. They're very intentional with every word that's coming out of their mouth. Right now, if you're the fast talker and you're talking to somebody who's that slow and deliberate, you're both going to drive each other crazy, right? And so you, as the salesperson in this, it's if you're talking to somebody who has a very slow and deliberate pace in their talking and in their tonality, you don't have to match it exactly, but you better, if you're at a 50 out of 100 and they're at a 10 out of 100, you better slow down to 20. You better slow down to 30, because you're going to lose them very quickly. So that's part of what we're trying to teach you right now, is it's not mimicking, it's mirroring and matching.
And I think one of the things you said, Joe, was really a key component of this. It's being intentional, right? So you do a lot of this stuff anyway. And right, whether you're doing it or someone else is doing it and mirroring and matching you or whatever else, you are going to have similarities, and you are going to be most in alignment with people who are similar to you. You're the most in alignment and the most comfortable, right? Yeah. That does not mean that that's the person who you want to be. That does not mean that's the person that you admire most. You might admire somebody that's the complete opposite of you. Some of my best friends have huge personalities because I don't. I don't go to a party or a networking event and meet 40 people. I meet one or two and build really, really good relationships with the one or two that I feel in alignment with. But the people that I'm always in awe about, that I'm just like awe-inspiring, oh my gosh, are the people that go into an event like that, or they have 75 friends that are blowing up their text messages every 5 minutes asking them to go out. And I'm like, I haven't gotten a text message asked to go out in like a month, right? These people just have it going on for some reason. So you are going to be more in alignment with people automatically or naturally sometimes. And you can feel that already, right, Joe? I mean, you can feel when you walk into a room and you're like, don't even say something.
Right.
And you already, I get this person. This person is like me. And that's how most people describe it. This person is a lot like me.
Yes. And so, and again, the main point here is noticing. Notice the things that are going on and adapt yourself to those so that they feel comfortable speaking to you. Again, speak to people in the way that you want to be talked to, right? So if they need to receive communication in a certain way, give them the communication in that way. So if we look down at speech rate, this is probably the easiest one to perceive, is the actual speed with which they're talking. Some people just like to talk really fast. When they're talking about tone and inflection, it's all about the uptick. When people talk and the end of their sentences go up, that sounds more like a question. That's just the way. So speed is very, very easy to see. Sometimes that can be very difficult to mimic. If you speak very rapidly, it's very difficult to slow down. Very difficult to be more deliberate, but you've got to be intentional about that. Cadence, as Josh and I were talking about in preparing this training, cadence is really interesting because you can have people who have a slower cadence but talk fast. So they might talk really fast as they're thinking about things and putting their thoughts together and then deliberating their point, right? Fast rate of speech, but their cadence is a little bit slower. Or their cadence might be kind of this perpetual. They just talk very, their flow in that. You want to talk about conversational flow, Josh, before we get to perpetual versus finite?
Yeah, I do. The one thing about speed, though, I think is really interesting is that, Joe was saying that it's hard for people to pull back. I actually think that ultimately it's harder for people who are slow, methodical people to speed up.
Right.
It's easier when you have to pull back on your thoughts a little bit and go, okay, enough brainstorming, take a breath, slow down, take a sip of water every once in a while. But to actually change from being slow and methodical and thoughtful and more of that thinker mentality and bringing that pace faster, I think can sometimes be really challenging for people.
Yeah.
The conversational flow is a really interesting thing too. There are people that, generally speaking, are very much on track. They're the same way, like we were just talking about. In their head, they've thought through the meeting already, and there are 7 things that they want to cover, and they have that same time frame and everything else. And that's how their mind works. And then there are other people that are just all over the place. They just want to have a conversation. And so the flow of it is really understanding if somebody is like step by step by step, or if they're just a loose cannon, they're all over the place. And I would tell you that some of the best experiences I've had is when I've been able to emulate the person's conversational flow, because it's in alignment with who they are and how they think and how they work through it. So if you see them taking notes after everything you say, slow down what you say enough so that they can capture all the notes, and then they look up at you, and then you continue on. Right. It's not only is it being in alignment with them, but it's also, for a lot of people, it's a respect for them.
Yeah, because people definitely process information differently. And like you said, some people, as they're talking, it's how they're processing their thoughts. The talking is what allows them to do that. If you're so agendized and so clear on exactly what's going to happen, they feel inhibited by the structure of or the flow of the conversation and can't process things. And so just be aware. Again, these are just things to notice. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you need to change anything, but noticing it will help lend you in the direction that you need to go. So let's talk about
noticing it. Sorry to jump in, but noticing it will automatically help you to change and make those adaptations. Just the fact that you pay attention to their cadence, or you pay attention to the flow, or what they're talking about, how they're emphasizing things. If they emphasize, the word structure 15 times and they're like, blah, 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 it's really about the structure of things. Then you can go, bing, 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 bing. They're really focused on the structure. So I should probably align the things that I speak about that would help their structure, that would make them feel more confident about their structure, or that our structure and our business is solidified, and that is strong, and that is on point. That's
Right.
what makes most sense to me.
Yeah, totally. The when we get down to perpetual versus finite, these are in a profiling system that I used to use. They're a perception of time. Perpetual people see time like they're the kind of person who sets aside 30 minutes to work on something, and 3 hours later they're like, oh, I have all this other stuff to do. They just get so enveloped into the project that time just kind of is elusive to them. Finite people, you could ask them, hey, what time is it? And within 5 or 10 minutes, they're pretty accurate. Like they know what time it is basically at all times. They're aware of when you're coming up on minute 27 of a 30-minute meeting. They're aware that this needs to wrap up. And so what I will tell you is that perpetual people have been perpetual their whole life, and finite people have been finite their whole life. It's one of those ingrained characteristics that we have. Perpetual people have been used to being interrupted their whole life. They will keep talking for as long as you allow them to talk. And they've heard this a lot in their life. Hey, we got to wrap up. I'm about 20 minutes late to my next meeting. Right? So they are used to this. And so it's okay, in noticing, is this person just kind of clueless about time? Then I'm going to have to take charge of that. Or if they're finite people are really interesting. They tend to be more sensitive to being interrupted. If you interrupt a finite person, understand the consequence that will come with that. They don't love it. Like they're aware of how much time is left. They're aware of what needs to happen in that time. And so just be very cognizant when you are going to interrupt someone versus not. Again, this is just a noticing. You could, by the way, if you don't want to be a sales ninja, then just keep being the way you are and show up consistently every time, and you'll get the results you've always gotten. If you want to level up and get to the next level, which is, I guess, why you're watching these videos, it's begin to take notice of all of these kinds of things. So let's move to gestures. Josh, I love that picture.
Couldn't have been more perfect for all of this. Again, a lot of this goes to, the empathy and attunement goes to, again, paying attention. So there are things that you'll hear Joe and I say over and over and over again. There are things that we will not only reiterate, but emphasize on a regular basis in everything that we do, because they are so profound in what we do. And it is a daily activity. It's like how you're supposed to drink water every day, how you're supposed to brush your teeth every day. These type of things are so ingrained in our perspective, our purview of how the conversation should go, that's just, it's a big deal, right? I don't need to go much more into that. So when it comes to empathy and attunement, when it comes to their gestures, it's about making sure that you are paying attention to who they are and how they act. So you don't want to be the person that has their hand in their lap when the other person is going like this. You don't want to be the person that is complete polar opposites of them. And that does not mean that, and I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of this throughout, but it does not mean that you should also make the exact same huge movements, right? But you want to be empathetic of how they move and what they do, and just be really conscientious of what they do, how they communicate.
Right. I come from an Italian family, and it's an axiom for a reason. We talk with our hands. When we're talking, our hands are moving, right? And so we tend to feel comfortable with other people who are talking with their hands when they're moving. It's again, this mirroring and matching. And I think, there are some things that are telltale signs. Some of them have been falsely accused of being something. Like, I don't know if you'll be able to see me, but if I'm sitting like this in a meeting, a lot of people for a long time have said that that's a confrontational stance. It's not necessarily true. It's actually, for a lot of part, it's like, if I'm like this, it's a self-soothing stance. And so, when people are doing this kind of thing, it's like you're giving yourself a hug, right? And so if Josh is sitting like this, and I want to sit in a way that is welcoming to him, not like I need to address, like I remember having a conversation with a client one time, and I actually was a little bit irritated with this client, and I was standing there like this, just having a conversation with him, and he's like, you're very confrontational right now about how you're standing. I'm like, Steve, I'm not confrontational. Like I'm standing here. Like, so you need to be cognizant of what is actually going on with their, if they are sitting back and they're relaxed. There's actually what we'll do is we'll provide a resource. There's a phenomenal training that a former CIA spy, I mean, this is a legitimate spy who wrote an entire book on interpreting body language, but understanding what's going on with body language. So we'll get that resource to you.
That doesn't sound like legit at all.
Yeah. So as you can see here, again, noticing, are there subtle body movements and gestures versus very pronounced? Are there habitual movements that somebody, and again, this might go back to self-soothing for them. They might be uncomfortable in a one-on-one setting. They prefer to be communicating in a group, but there might be these habitual movements that they do, and it's not necessarily matching it, but it's acknowledging it and noticing it. I was talking with a newer friend who I met at a conference, and it wasn't quite a tick, but it was like a movement that he would make with his chin. He would he'd say something. As he started a sentence, he would start it like this. When he would talk for a little bit, and then he'd complete the thought and do that. And I noticed myself starting to do that just subconsciously. That's okay. You're mirroring and matching. Now, if they have some obvious tick, or it might even be a disorder or something like that, you wouldn't necessarily want to mimic that just to mimic that, to make them feel comfortable. It would not have the same impact.
Yeah, most people already know that they have something like that. I worked with probably one of the most amazing guys, there's just good human beings ever. And he had a tick in his eye, or it was a neuro issue, neurotransmitter,
like an involuntary movement.
Yeah, he couldn't even do anything, and he had that twitch, and he knew he had it, and he was a performer as well, so it made it even more challenging for him. But if I were to do anything like that, or even like gently wink my eye or anything like that, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be a good thing. It would be a very, very negative thing. But I guess the one thing you should be aware of is if there's something that you end up doing naturally and automatically, that will be okay. So if they end their sentence and go, right? And all of a sudden you start doing tie downs at the end of your sentences, and you do that naturally. Does that make sense? Or if you even have, they say dude a couple too many times, and all of a sudden you find yourself saying dude. It's
Right.
not that world. You don't have to like pull it back today, right off. You're not going to offend them in a major way, because it's natural. And you can tell when somebody does something naturally versus when it's forced a lot of times when it comes to those type of things.
That is for sure. And that's one of the worst things that you can do, is be obvious in the way that you're mirroring and matching in a way that is unnatural and, more importantly, inauthentic. You've got to be authentic with this. So the easiest one we left for last, this is really what I want you to take away from it. If you're on a Zoom meeting and you have somebody who is, is posturing like this, they're relaxed, they're at ease, in conversation, be relaxed and be at ease with them. If they're leaning in and they're excited about everything, lean in, be excited with them. There's that. It's probably the easiest thing to mimic. Now, if they're sitting like this on their chair and you want to sit like this on your chair, like that's okay, but it's not like, here, Josh, let's just do a little role play. So you and I are having a chat, and you're going to be the client, and I'm just kind of matching you. I'm not going to like immediately follow and do everything that Josh does, as he's doing it. That would be ridiculous, right? But
I just realized that nobody can see us when we're doing that because it's only one screen at a time.
Oh, that's true. Okay. Well, here's the point of it. You don't want to match them like pace for pace. Josh puts his arm back and I put my arm back. Then Josh puts his hands up and I put my hands up. Like, you wouldn't necessarily do that. But it might be if you're moving from here and they move back and put their arms up like that, you might move back and just kind of be in this position. You just and it's even more apparent when you're in person. If you're in person for meetings, matching posture can be a very powerful way to subconsciously make a connection that really, they're pretty, it's almost imperceptible if you do it right. So This one is always a ton of fun. So you might need to pause the video here. I'd recommend that you pause the video and just kind of scan all of these and like just name the emotion that's on the person's face, you know, as you do that. So take a second to pause and just go through this for a second. And now that you're back after pausing, facial expressions, you really can't, when you're just on a telephone with somebody, you can hear things, you can perceive things, but you can't see things. And it becomes vitally important. This is part of the reason why we're always going to encourage you to, whenever possible, use the tools that are available to us in the 21st century. You know, we've got Zoom, we've got Loom, we've got a million different video ways to connect with people. Use it because you can use their facial expressions to pick up clues as to what they're thinking. Anything to add from facial expressions, Josh?
We both took a drink at the exact same time, so it was kind of useless for us both to speak. Yeah, when it comes to facial expressions, again, some of them are more pronounced. So my guess is you could look at most of these and have something that was kind of more of an empathetic mirror to this. That some of these you're like, there's no way, you know, like the huge crazy smile or the hands over your mouth and teeth, you're not going to do the same thing. And some people do this in front of you, right? But if you did that, you can use a similar one to go, oh my God, right? Like open your eyes big and wide. And so there are ways of being in alignment. Again, I know I use that word all the time, but being in alignment without being completely obvious. And the more you pay attention to it, you know, ultimately we talk about the sales ninjas, you know, the more you pay attention to this stuff, you'll start to see the nuances. And this is what happened for me when I started to do behavioral training years ago and started to get certified and do all of that. I was looking through a completely different lens in life afterward. After I did the behavioral training, I was able to help understand or to better understand how people made their decisions, how people thought about things, if I spoke too fast or if I was too slow or if I was too loud or if I didn't provide enough information. You know, if you really pay attention, you know, as they say about success leaves clues, you know, people and their emotions and being connected to people, that leaves clues as well and probably even more prevalent.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, one of the most basic human needs is acceptance, affirmation. You know, going back, if you look at like behavioral psychology, it's one of the strongest motivators as a human being. When you look at herd mentality, you look at other mammals, like their survival is dependent upon being part of the herd. One of the greatest things, or one of the worst things that can happen to them, is that they're rejected from the herd. So when if you're telling a story and somebody has an emotion like this lady right here, like, you know, and you match that with like, right, I know, you know, it's like that acceptance of that emotion is proper, you know, what you're feeling is right. And so you kind of match that facial expression, again, not like, you know, verbatim, but acknowledging that, yes, you're feeling the proper way right now.
That's the perfect way to say it, is the acceptance of the emotion, right?
Yeah.
Just paying attention to the emotion and accepting it, and your response, your face should, you know, accept their face.
Yeah, exactly. I accept your face. I love it.
I accept your face.
So let's dive into sensory predictates.
So Joe, I'm gonna let you start with this because I have to do something real quick, but you start with this real quick.
Perfect. So sensory predictates, when you're looking at how people receive information, how they deal with information, and there's a new one at the bottom that is newer in our world, which is auditory digital. But people process information visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, and then we've got this auditory digital. So if you look at, you know, you can see each of these with, you know, you've got this big eyeball, you've got your ear, you've got the touch, and then, you know, down on the lower right.
So, you know, the way that we look at this is, you know, this is how, not only how people act, but the words that they use. So they would say, you know, I see what you mean there. It looks like blank, or, you know, in my view, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And so the way to mirror and match them there, or to have that ease of conversation, is you can say, well, let me paint a picture for you, or picture this. And people who are visual, and we can get really deep into each of these too, but people who are visual, will speak visually as well. People who are kinesthetic or auditory will speak that way as well. As Joe was saying, one of the ones that's kind of like sneaked its way into these the sensories is the auditory digital, which is people who almost think experientially. Like, how am I going to process this? How is the flow going to be? I want to learn. I want to better understand. And I think what's happened is that is, I'll say, kind of a meld, or a combination of all of the other ones together. It's how am I going? Is my environment going to be changed or managed by this? So I would, if it were me, Joe, I would take a screenshot of this, or when we put up the deck or whatever afterwards, the training, print this out, put it next to you, and as you're learning, you're listening, or as you're listening, you're learning, and you're going through these type of conversations. You go, I just wonder. Spend the day when you talk to people you're prospecting. See if you can tell if they're auditory or kinesthetic, visual, auditory, digital, whatever else it is, and see if you can predict that a little bit more.
And use this as a tool. I mean, all the words that if they are a visual learner, use words like see, look, let's take a look at what we've got to offer, or listen to this list. Whatever it might be. Just pay attention to that. So let's dive into, in a minute or less, we're going to give you the bonus here, which is what not to do. We've talked about this all throughout. Do not exactly match what the person is doing. It will be a telltale sign that you're trying to use a tactic to sell them. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to feel that way. Definitely don't try to talk in an accent that ain't yours. You do that, that's a dead giveaway. Don't even try to do that. Be yourself. The main thing is to be authentic, but use these tools. Don't focus so much on mirroring and matching that you aren't present in the conversation. And obviously don't match dramatic habits. If somebody's got an obvious way of being that is uniquely them, you don't need to match that. You can get up to speed with them, but don't match it verbatim. So if I were you, here's what I'm taking away from this conversation. Begin elegantly noticing the things that are around you in your conversations with people, and begin to match the things that make sense to match. Use these tools. You'll know when you've done it wrong, because you'll feel it. And you'll know when you're doing it right, because people will feel more at home with you. And so that's the goal, is how can we make people feel more at home? How can we communicate with them in a way that they need to be communicated with? So we look forward. Oh, go ahead.
I need to add one more thing. When you're going through these conversations, you don't have to mirror and match them right off the bat. You can take the next week, because if you haven't been doing it already, it's okay. One more week won't matter. So just be aware for the next week. Pay attention, listen intently, be really focused and clear. And once you start to see these things, then you can start to put the activity in place. It's like a golfer that swings without the ball. You want to take it through that motion and that motion and that motion, and then strike the ball. You don't want to do it your first time and walk up and whack the ball. It almost never works. Right. I'm a hacker golfer, and I can tell you it almost never works when you just walk up and hit the ball, or you do a Happy Gilmore and run from 5 feet away and take a crack at it. It just isn't good. So practice, listen, learn first, and then start to use it on the field, if you will.
That's right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you in the next training. Go put these things to work.
See you soon.